Are you a big sports fan? I'm just making small talk because I know they're doing mic checks.
Oh, I am a Lakers fan, Fairweather fan.
Are you going
The ninth season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. It's my pleasure this week to introduce a couple of academics, and they are a lot more than that if you listen to them today. With me this week is the director of the School of Communications at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Jeremy Lipschultz. Dr. Jeremy Lipschultz. Also with us is Dr. Mike Hilt. He is head of the graduate studies of the School of Communication here at UNO. You have written a new book, and I want to tell folks the name of it first. It's kind of a textbook, but what brings them to us this week is more enlightening than just a little textbook. The name of it is Mass Media, an Aging Population and the Baby Boomers. Now, if you're like me, you fall among that demographic of baby boomers. And you're really talking about kind of a social science, not just a communication endeavor here.
It's very much a study of social changes, social influences in American culture.
Now, you're actually using this brand new book for one of your classes, which is basically about, what's the name of the course?
The course is a graduate seminar in mass media and aging. And so in the class, we talk about media and aging and the aging population. We talk about how the media portrays older adults and how the older adults use media. Not just television, we also get into newspaper, the internet, and that sort of thing. You know, I think maybe for the viewers, it might be interesting to know some of the definitions so they can understand a little bit.
You know, I think they are. When you take, I know, a sociology course, or you need to know kind of what people call things or how they refer to them. Go ahead, give us a little primer.
Baby boomers are defined as those born between the years 1946 and 1964, and there are approximately 77 million of us who fit that category.
Now, you aren't quite in that, are you?
Oh, yeah.
We're all baby boomers here, so we have a real vested interest
sure.
in this. And any other big terms we should know that you're going to refer to? I won't test you on this. Let me say that from someone who worked in commercial news for a long time, the demographic was God. I say that with a small g. And 18 to 34 was kind of king, queen of the road. We targeted that audience because they are thought to be the spenders, have a lot of disposable income, are easily swayed by commercials. So if that's still true, or pretty true, I guess it depends on the program and how certain products want to peddle themselves. What about these baby boomers that do have money, many of them, and will they be influential when it comes to being a magic demographic?
Well, it appears that the baby boomers, as they age, may not age exactly like their parents did. Their parents' generation was a generation of savers, and they tended to have fairly conservative spending habits as they aged. This generation seems to want to do it differently, as they've done everything throughout their lives differently, to cut a new path and to find new adventure in the aging process.
I think we're beginning to see some marketing, but I don't know if they're really taking this into consideration, Mike, when they...
There are changes, and we're beginning to see some of those changes. I think one of the points that you mentioned about disposable income that's often lost is this segment of the population, these boomers, as they get older, they are the ones with the disposable income. And they're the ones that have been thinking about retirement for quite a while. They're the ones that have been planning trips. They're the ones that have had to think about health care and how they're going to pay for that. And so this notion that it's that 18 to 35 demographic, that they're the ones that have the most disposable income and the ones most susceptible to change, I don't think that's still accurate. The boomers are the ones who had to combat the computer coming into the workplace and maybe learning new technology in the workplace. And so I think you're going to see a change, and you're going to begin to see some of those changes.
Before we get to some of those changes, one of the things that strikes me is that I was paying it, since I knew you were going to be on here, I started paying attention more to ads. And yes, on Nightline, they will skew to an older demographic, and you'll see them advertising Cadillacs and things like that. However, most of the ads deal with people that are younger, I believe, because they like, the younger generation can deal with planned obsolescence very easily. I need something new, I need the hottest, I need a cell phone that went from just making phone calls to then text messaging to now taking pictures. And I use that as an example of how they have to have the new. They're used to throwing it away and running on with their lives. And that's great for the economy. I mean, they're good for the economy, trying to keep it expanded. We, on the other hand, we're not done acquiring, but we've got close to having our houses, if not paid off, under control. We're a little choosier when we pick out things, maybe, and cars and big ticket items. So there's a little difference, kind of a dichotomy, I think, in the marketplace.
Well, the 18 to 34-year-olds remain important. We're not saying
they will always be important.
They're not important, but what we're saying is, at least in certain segments of the consumer marketplace, this aging demographic is increasingly important. Areas such as travel, for example, can be a real target area for this group. They have more time on their hands as they head into retirement. They have goals of places they wanted to see that they never have been able to travel to during their earlier years. And so that area, health care is an important area, of course. Retirement facilities, those kinds of markets are important. And it's a growing population because of this large number of people moving toward retirement.
So advertisers are going to be pretty smart, is what you're saying.
Well,
they better be.
They better be, and we would think they would be. The other thing to keep in mind, we're talking about an 18-year span for this baby boomer generation. So those that are from the earliest years, 1946, 47, 48, as they are getting close to the age of 60, and they're thinking more and more of the retirement maybe coming up within the next decade or so. You also have to think of the ones who were born in 64, who are have just turned 40. They are still, and you mentioned, the throwaway, the disposable items.
They're still clinging to the younger end.
They still do that, and so you've got a real mixed bag with the generation, and you see different things, and so you have to be careful to not assume that they all think the same way or act the same way.
They're almost a transitional generation in terms of how they treat the later years or the retirement years, and many of them won't will not perhaps be able to afford retirement, or they may want to work longer. So that's a whole different ball of wax. Is there going to be a difference between, let's say, how they're marketed to? I'm ending with a preposition. I hate to do that around people that write, or teach writing, and the content of, say, the news, the newspaper, the internet, the content of programming. That the advertisers are always sort of ahead of the game compared to sometimes how we program and how our stereotypes or our attitudes towards certain groups of people.
We've certainly begun to see changes in news content as well as in marketing, because issues such as Social Security in the last two presidential elections, 2000 and 2004, rose to higher levels of importance. And we anticipate in the 2008 election, as these first boomers begin to retire, that it's really going to become increasingly an important issue. So, we've always had persistent coverage of the elderly, elder scams kinds of stories, but we're getting a more diverse group of stories and coverage about older people, not just the negative kinds of stereotypical images of older people, but also positive images of examples of people working into their 70s and 80s, people in reinventing themselves in their 70s and 80s.
One of the things about the traditional coverage, like the senior scams and that sort of thing, is that it, and hopefully we're getting away from the picture that, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone that's been featured in one of those stories, that you are prey rather than a proactive human being. I hope that's going to change.
Well, I think it will. However, I think you'll still see some stories like that,
Well,
and they're still out there.
And they'll always be necessary.
Right. But I would hope that what you would begin to see would be more stories about the life-changing, the second, third, fourth career, other things that can happen post-retirement in terms of other opportunities, whether it's travel, going back to work after retiring from a full-time position. There are a lot of stories out there that can be done that are positive in nature, and that's what we would begin to think. We would think that you would begin to see some of those as time moves along, and as the boomers, and especially the younger boomers, begin to fall into positions where they're making some of those decisions, such as in the newsroom.
Now, the mass media, let's say like the Omaha World Herald that reaches a broad audience, or your network TV news or your local TV news, it's trying to reach as many people as possible, even though they may target a certain group. They might have a harder time than, let's say, cable networks that skew a little bit this way, or geared to golfers, or geared to, you know, like Bravo or something, although they haven't been able to figure out who they are. But do you know what I mean? Where, as we get into more specialized media?
Well, we are saying that mass media need to take an account of this, because at the time that we did our studies, the average age of network television news viewers was already up to 56 years old. Newspaper readership is an aging population, so that should be increasingly their target audience.
And yet you don't want to disenfranchise the younger people. I mean, it's a sticky wicket.
It's a difficult situation. You know that the majority of your audience is getting older, and yet if you strictly cater to them, you are cutting off a lot of other younger people who eventually
are going to get older.
Right, and will be your audience as well.
And if they lose the habit of, say, watching network or local news or reading a newspaper, they're not likely to, well, I don't know, but they would be less likely to pick it up as a lifelong habit. So where does that leave us on, let's say, discrimination, attitudes, perceptions that tend to come behind or follow behind or are harder to change than, let's say, an advertiser's outlook or a programming? Well, we'll experiment with some new things. It takes a while. There's a lag, isn't there, between how society reacts as a whole and, you know, avant-garde kinds of things?
But we have reason to be optimistic, because there is a sea change in attitudes. Right here at this university, for example, the increasing importance of gerontology as an area of study for undergraduates, and most recently using those studies in aging in the cultural diversity mix program. So people are coming around to this, and usually places like universities are the first places that attitudes begin to change. And I would expect you're going to see this proliferate out in the population as we begin to learn more about the aging process, understand it more, and come to grips with the issues that are raised by it.
We've heard that, and we heard a lot in the last election when they were talking about Social Security in the future and raising the age of eligibility and that kind of thing. And we've also heard that in a lifetime, as it stands now, you're going to have, if you're young, at least 3 or 4 careers, different careers, not just jobs. Are we preparing our entire population for that concept? Not just the seniors that might have to have more, you know, reach career number 2, 3, or 4 and didn't plan on it, but the younger people who hopefully are going to work with the older people. You talk about this sort of, you know, diversity here on a campus. Is society going to be better ready to have all ages working actively and excitedly together rather than, oh, we're pushing him out the door kind of thing with the gold watch?
Well, I think it's hard to get people interested in the topic. And by that I
So
mean
you didn't
everyone.
take a real hot topic that you're saying to do your book on?
I don't know that I would say that.
You're on the leading edge.
Right, thank you. What I would say is that to bring everyone together to work on the issue, I think is maybe hoping for a little much. I think what we need to do first is make sure that everyone understands that there is an issue here that needs to be addressed. And we've seen some of that, as Jeremy mentioned, with Social Security in the last couple presidential elections. I think it'll become an even hotter issue, if that's possible, with the 2008 election. And we just need to keep pushing these issues to the forefront to get everyone aware that this is something that we need to be talking about and taking a look at.
Jeremy, you pointed out to me when we were chatting earlier that AARP in the last election merged a little mini partnership with MTV in trying to reach both ends of the spectrum in the discussion of things like Social Security. That's kind of exciting as a prospect, I would think.
Yeah, they came to the view that if we just talk to older Americans, it's going to be marginalized as an issue. But if we allow people to see that this affects everybody in society, then it's going to be a much more powerful discussion.
You talk about a term, let me get it right, disenfranchisement or disengagement.
Right.
And you talk about how traditionally we were, well, explain what that is, where there was sort of a separation at a certain point in life between being actively engaged and those that disengage because they're older and they're sort of headed out of the social structure.
Right. It was thought that, and I would think that it's still thought by some, that once you retire, once you are away from the workplace, you disengage from society. You no longer have the co-workers, that environment. You're at home, possibly alone, maybe not with that family support system that you may have had at one time with children or other close relatives. And so you've disengaged from society and as you said, disconnected.
You're sinking slowly into the West, to use
right.
the old phrase.
That was one line of thought. Another line of thought is that that's the time when you find other ways to remain active. And you do that through other retirement groups, hooking up with clubs or other people at the retirement center or something like that, so that you're still involved. And one way that you could remain involved is through things like the internet and logging on to websites and using the internet as a tool to reestablish that communication with others, whether it's email or websites, that kind of thing.
And we've seen some tremendous examples of what one might call re-engagement. We spoke in North Omaha with, I think she was about 84,
right.
85 years old. She had come to learn how to use the web. She had created a website for her family spread all across the country that was password protected, and they could go in and share family photos. And so she was running around with a digital camera and uploading these photos and having a wonderful time, engaging both with her family across the country as well as with folks in the computer center there.
I guess what we would argue is that there are always going to be exceptions for anything that we talk about, but to simply dismiss the group as, well, they're not willing to learn new technology, I just don't think is accurate. I think they are if you're willing to take the time to show them.
When my mother passed away a few years ago, she was on her 6th computer. Mm-hmm. And we used to call her with questions, which is sort of the reverse. But I mean, she grasped new things. She grabbed onto them when they came out. And I think that maybe the younger generation, which does that now, would be more apt to, as they all, even the lower end of the baby boomers, will be more apt to continue to do that.
Yeah, our belief is that they've learned all this technology in the workplace and they're going to take that into retirement with them.
In the short term, when we start to get that upper end of the baby boomers moving into retirement, and we will have some social policy issues such as Social Security and that, how do you think that the value of older Americans, and I'm sure they'll invent a new term, because they're no longer gray, they use hair dye. But how do you think that we will be valued as we age? Will it be different? Will we be considered as valuable and undisengaged as, let's say, 30 or 40-year-olds?
Well, I think that there will be more value placed. I think you have to keep in mind that as the boomers age, that's a large segment, and so if they're a significant segment of the population that's making the decisions on what we see in media and around us, that positive view will come through. I don't think it will be universal. I think you'll still see some negative stereotyping of older adults, but it would be my hope that that would be lessened and that you would begin to see more positive portrayals, not just in news, but in entertainment as well, and advertising.
For those of us that are sort of stuck in the middle, we're not real gray yet, and yet we're not real young, there is a fear among friends my age that they're not wanted in the workplace. So if they embark on that second or third career, that they're having a hard time getting in because even managers are younger than they used to be. Everybody's younger.
But there are also reports that we are going to be short workers in the decades to come, and there's going to be a real need to draw upon older people to fill those gaps. So I think older people in the future are going to be in demand. So again, we may be a little bit out front on this trend, but in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to happen.
So you've finished this book and you go on with your lives, but I know in academics you go on studying. Is this, you've done news and you've studied a lot of things about sensationalism in news. Are you still going to, look at this subject a little further?
Oh, I imagine that we will. This is the culmination of research in terms of this particular book, but we had research prior to the book that we drew upon for some of the content, and we're continuing with that research in hopes of future journal articles or even a book. We don't know yet.
Didn't you do your PhD in something?
In community and human resources, but the focus was on gerontology and media, right?
So where do we go from here, both as people who study this kind of thing and people who live it? What would you, if you could project into the future? You were sounding kind of hopeful there, but in the short term, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe through the next election a bit, the next presidential election, what will be the things we have to grapple with as media people and as those that are receiving the message?
Well, the traditional problems aren't going to go away, things like age discrimination. Those kinds of problems are very difficult to eradicate completely. So those issues are going to be there. But I think beyond those kind of traditional issues, I think new issues are going to emerge that we can't even imagine right now, in part because of the rapid technological change, particularly in the healthcare area. I mean, we have the prospect of cloning body parts, of potentially, engaging robotics into extending people's quality of life. And I suspect in that process of change, we're going to also face a number of ethical as well as legal issues related to the aging process and the nature of what it means to be an older American.
I think the social issues that we've talked about just today are going to remain with us for a number of years. I think possibly the intensity of the discussion may increase as more and more people begin to realize that this isn't just something that's off way in the future. It's occurring right now in terms of Social Security questions, healthcare issues, and they're issues that need to be addressed.
Let's talk about the role of the media in this kind of change. I think that you looked at that as well. What is the role when you send your young charges out into the world and they have a bachelor's degree in communication, more specifically an area that they studied was journalism? What do you hope they take out into it regarding our just societal shift?
Media people are both reflectors of social change as well as agents of social change, because we all learn from mass media. So we learn about changes that are happening in society. So my hope would be that the new generation of journalists will come out with a deeper understanding of older people and a less stereotypical view of the aging process, and apply that in their reporting of news and features and entertainment, and give society a broader, more balanced view of people of all ages.
We urge our students to have a well-rounded education. It's not enough for us just to teach them how to operate a camera or how to write a sentence or a story, but they need to also understand the social implications of some of the issues that they'll be reporting on. They need to understand history. And so what we hope when they leave here, and I think for the most part we're successful with it, is that they have a well-rounded education. They have the knowledge of the industry, but they also know how to take some of the issues that they'll face and turn those into stories that we can read or watch and learn something from.
Do you think it's important for viewers, readers, the objects of all this media attention to let advertisers, media know if they're unhappy with the way lack of coverage, say, for senior issues, or just issues that affect, say, let's say 40 on up even, or how something was covered or stereotypes? Do you think it's important for them to speak out? Because sometimes your young reporters go in and they have a little control, because consultants and all kinds of things have more of an effect than they do when they're starting out.
It's actually much easier than ever for them to speak out with the advent of the internet. The Federal Communications Commission now has a fairly developed website that allows people to make complaints about mass media. We see this in the broadcast indecency area where, you know, we've had literally thousands of complaints registered. And I think increasingly you'll see the audience taking a more critical eye about all kinds of things that they see on television that they may not be happy with. You know, it's a democracy, it's a democratic process, and media people need to be prepared to defend the decisions that they make, and they'll be stronger and better for it.
It's always been my thought that the audience is usually not shy if they don't like something. And I would just echo what Jeremy said. With the internet and other avenues, I would say that it's going to increase rather than go away, and media members need to be aware of that.
Don't be shy to voice your opinion. I never am, so, and I don't suppose you two are either. Hey, I want to thank you. Very interesting topic. There's probably plenty of fodder for further research. I want to thank Dr. Jeremy Lipschultz and Dr. Michael Hilt of the School of Communications here at UNO for being with us. Join us next week for Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.